The Silent Warrior. The Golden Lantern, a renowned restaurant in the heart of the city, shimmered under the warm glow of its crystal chandeliers. It was a place where the elite dined, a sanctuary of refinement and prestige, where every plate was a masterpiece, and every guest was treated with unwavering reverence. For the wealthy patrons, the restaurant was a haven of luxury. For Elena Carter, however, it was a battlefield. Elena had spent years serving her country. As a former Marine, she had seen the worst of humanity and had survived countless adversities. She had been deployed in the harshest conditions, had faced enemies in the dead of night, and had fought battles few could even imagine. But the hardest war she had ever fought was not on foreign soil. It was right here, in the Golden Lantern, where humiliation and belittlement awaited her at every turn. A woman out of place. Elena had taken the job as a waitress not out of passion, but out of necessity. After returning from duty, adjusting to civilian life had been tougher than she expected. Her military skills did not translate easily into the corporate world, and with bills piling up, she had little choice but to take whatever work she could find. She was not ashamed of her job. Hard work was something she respected. But what she didn't expect was the way she would be treated. Her manager, Raymond Hensley, was a tyrant in a suit. He was a man who thrived on power and control, and Elena, with her quiet defiance and unshakable composure, was someone he despised. He seemed to take great pleasure in undermining her, barking orders, belittling her in front of customers, and ensuring she was assigned the most difficult shifts. "You're too slow, Carter. Maybe you should have stayed in the military, where they don't care about customer service," he sneered one evening as she rushed to clear a table. Elena didn't flinch. She had survived worse than an arrogant manager with a superiority complex. But the silent warrior in her yearned for dignity, for respect, something she had fought so hard for, yet was denied in this small, pretentious corner of the world. The staff's silent understanding. Though the restaurant was a battlefield for Elena, it was not one she fought alone. The other staff members saw what was happening, and though most were too afraid to stand up to Raymond, they offered small gestures of support. Lily, a young server with dreams of becoming a chef, would often whisper words of encouragement. "I don't know how you handle it, Elena," she murmured one evening, helping her carry a heavy tray. "If I were you, I'd have punched him by now." Elena smirked. "He's not worth the energy." Marco, the head chef, was another quiet ally. A gruff man with a heart of gold, he often slipped her extra portions of food at the end of her shift, knowing that she barely made enough to afford proper meals. "You saved lives out there," he grumbled one night as he handed her a wrapped steak. "And here you are getting yelled at by a man who couldn't last a day outside his air-conditioned office." Elena appreciated their kindness, but she never complained, never fought back. She simply endured, knowing that some battles were won through patience, not confrontation. The night that changed everything. It was a Friday night, and the Golden Lantern was at full capacity. The room buzzed with quiet conversations, the clinking of glasses, and the occasional laughter of the wealthy guests. Elena moved through the restaurant with practiced precision, balancing trays, refilling wine glasses, and dodging Raymond's ever-watchful gaze. Then, at exactly 9:42 p.m., the doors burst open. Two men, clad in dark hoodies and masks, stormed inside. One of them wielded a gun. The room fell into instant silence. Patrons froze mid-conversation, their forks suspended in the air. A woman let out a strangled gasp. "This is a robbery," the armed man shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. "Nobody moves, nobody gets hurt." Elena's heart pounded, but not with fear. It was an old, familiar adrenaline, the kind that had surged through her veins on the battlefield. She assessed the situation quickly. The men were nervous, their hands shaky. The one holding the gun wasn't used to wielding it. His grip was weak, his stance unsteady. The second man was more aggressive, barking orders at the terrified staff and patrons. Raymond, the ever-arrogant manager, stepped forward, his face pale. "Listen, there's no need for violence." "Shut up," the second man snarled, shoving him backward. Raymond stumbled, crashing into a table, sending glasses and plates shattering to the floor. A murmur of fear rippled through the room. Elena tightened her grip on the tray she was holding. She had two choices: stand down and hope for the best, or take action. She chose the latter. The plan in motion. Keeping her movements slow and deliberate, she took a cautious step forward. "Hey," she said evenly, directing her gaze toward the gunman. "You don't need to do this." "Stay back," he snapped, but she saw the hesitation in his eyes. She took another step. "You're scared. I get it, but this isn't the way." The second man, the more aggressive one, turned on her. "Who the hell are you?" Elena smiled. "Just a waitress," she said, her voice calm. "But I used to be a Marine." Silence. The gunman stiffened. The second man cursed under his breath. "You're lying," he spat. Elena slowly reached for the dog tag she still wore beneath her uniform, pulling it into view. "You think I'm lying?" The men exchanged uncertain glances. The gunman's grip faltered. He was young, too young to be doing this. She saw her opening. With lightning-fast reflexes, she launched the tray she was holding at the gunman's wrist. The force knocked the gun from his grasp, sending it skidding across the floor. Before he could react, she spun around and delivered a swift, precise kick to his chest, sending him crashing into a chair. Gasps erupted from the onlookers. The second man lunged at her, but Elena was ready. She sidestepped him effortlessly, grabbed a heavy wine bottle from a nearby table, and swung it upward, smashing it against his arm. He yelped in pain, dropping the knife he had been holding. By now, Marco, the head chef, had recovered from his shock. He rushed forward, tackling the second man to the ground. A moment later, the first man tried to scramble for the gun, but Lily kicked it away, sending it sliding out of reach. The restaurant erupted in cheers. Aftermath. The police arrived within minutes, taking the two men into custody. The patrons, still shaken but exhilarated, spoke in hushed tones about what had just transpired. Raymond, visibly shaken, looked at Elena as if seeing her for the first time. His lips moved, as if trying to find the words, but he said nothing. Instead, it was Marco who spoke. "You saved all of us tonight, Carter." His voice was filled with genuine respect. "Guess we owe you more than just free steak." Lily grinned, more like a promotion. The other staff members nodded in agreement, and for the first time in a long time, Elena felt seen. She had fought for her country. Tonight, she had fought for something else: her dignity, her worth, and the unwavering strength that no one could take from her. And as she looked around at the people who now saw her for who she truly was, she realized one thing: she had won this battle. The fallout, and a new battle begins. The aftermath of the robbery at the Golden Lantern rippled through the city like an unexpected storm. The once untouchable restaurant, known for its exclusivity and fine dining, was now the center of intense media attention. Reporters crowded the front entrance, their cameras flashing, eager to capture a glimpse of the woman who had stopped an armed robbery with nothing but quick thinking and sheer courage. But for Elena Carter, the real battle had just begun. The spotlight she never wanted. Elena had never been one for attention. Her years in the military had trained her to be disciplined, precise, and selfless. She had spent her life blending into the background, ensuring the safety of others while never seeking recognition for herself. But now, the world wanted to know who she was. The day after the robbery, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages poured in from old military friends, former colleagues, and even strangers who had heard about her bravery. News outlets wanted interviews. Some customers from the restaurant, inspired by her actions, started an online campaign to recognize her heroism. But the most unexpected call came from an unknown number. Elena Carter. The voice was smooth, professional. "This is Captain Michael Reyes, retired. I run a security consulting firm, and I read about what you did. We need people like you." Alina frowned. "I appreciate the offer, Captain, but I'm not looking for a career change. Not even for triple your current salary." She hesitated. It was tempting, but something held her back. "I'll think about it," she finally said. Hanging up, she exhaled deeply. The robbery had changed everything in a matter of hours. But not everyone was happy about it. Raymond's fury. While the world saw her as a hero, Raymond Hensley, her insufferable manager, saw her as a nuisance. The day after the incident, he stormed into the restaurant, his face red with frustration. He had lost control. The media frenzy wasn't about the Golden Lantern's five-star cuisine anymore. It was about Alina. The staff whispered her name in admiration, and for once, they weren't afraid to openly challenge him. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was someone they respected. And Raymond hated it. "You think you're some kind of celebrity now," he sneered as Alina clocked in for her shift. "This is a restaurant, Carter, not a damn action movie." Alina met his gaze steadily. She could see the insecurity behind his anger. "I never asked for attention," she replied calmly. "I just did what had to be done." "You're a waitress, Carter, not a hero." His voice was sharp, but it no longer had the same sting. Not after what had happened. She smiled slightly. "Funny, that's not what the customers are saying." Raymond clenched his jaw. He had been humiliated in front of everyone when the robbers shoved him aside. Now, Alina was the one people admired, and he couldn't stand it. "I don't care what the customers think," he snapped. "I run this place, and I don't need a waitress who thinks she's above the job." Alina shrugged. "Then fire me." For a moment, he seemed to consider it, but he couldn't. Not after what she had done for the restaurant. The media attention was bringing in more customers than ever before. People wanted to see the Marine waitress in action. So instead of firing her, he did what he did best. He made her life hell. The silent retaliation. Over the next few weeks, Raymond doubled down on his cruelty. He gave her the worst shifts, ensuring she worked late into the night and had the hardest tables. He increased her workload, forcing her to handle double the customers, while other waiters had half the work. He criticized everything she did, no matter how small the mistake. Alina could have quit. She had other options now, but she refused to let him win. Instead of complaining, she excelled. She worked harder, faster, more efficiently. The other staff saw what was happening, and in small ways, they pushed back too. Lily secretly covered some of Alina's tables. Marco refused to let Raymond's cruelty affect the kitchen staff. Even some of the customers, noticing the tension, started leaving bigger tips for Alina. Raymond's plan was backfiring. An unexpected visitor. One evening, as Alina finished wiping down a table, a stranger in a sharp black suit walked into the restaurant. He carried himself with quiet authority, his gaze scanning the room. He wasn't there for the food. He was looking for her. "Alina Carter?" he asked, approaching her table. She raised an eyebrow. "Depends on who's asking." The man extended his hand. "Detective Adrian Cole. I need to talk to you about the robbery." Alina frowned. "I already gave my statement to the police." Cole nodded. "Yes, but we've learned something new." He lowered his voice. "The two men who tried to rob this place. They weren't acting alone." A chill ran through Alina. "What do you mean?" The detective glanced around before leaning in. "We believe they were sent by someone. And they weren't here just for the cash." He paused, watching her reaction. "They were looking for something, or someone." Alina stiffened. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Cole studied her carefully. "I don't think this robbery was random. And I think you were the real target." Silence fell between them. For the first time since the incident, Alina felt a different kind of adrenaline coursing through her veins. Not the rush of battle. The creeping sense of being hunted. A hidden past resurfacing. That night, Alina lay awake in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling. Was it possible? She had made enemies before. Her military past wasn't clean. It was filled with classified missions, hidden threats, and unfinished business. Had someone from her past finally found her? She had never been afraid of danger. But something about this felt different. If the robbery wasn't random, that meant whoever was behind it might try again. And this time, they might not fail. A choice to make. The next morning, Alina found herself staring at the business card Captain Michael Reyes had given her. A security consulting job. A way out. A chance to escape Raymond and the restaurant altogether. But if she left now, she might never find out who was behind the attack. She had two choices. Take the job and walk away from the Golden Lantern before it was too late. Stay, fight, and uncover the truth, even if it meant putting herself in danger. She took a deep breath. Alina Carter was a Marine, and Marines don't run. She made her decision. She was staying. The shadows closing in. The weight of a decision. Alina Carter had made up her mind. She was staying. Walking away might have been the smart choice, the safe choice, but something about the detective's words had unsettled her. They were looking for someone. That meant the robbery wasn't random. That meant it had something to do with her. She had spent her life fighting battles. This was just another one. But unlike the wars she had fought in the past, this enemy was unseen, lurking in the shadows, and she didn't even know who or what she was up against. Whispers in the dark. The next few days passed uneventfully, at least on the surface. But Alina could feel the shift. Something had changed. The late-night shifts felt eerier. The air around her seemed heavier. And there was a lingering sensation of being watched. She wasn't the only one who noticed. "You okay?" Lily asked one evening as they wiped down tables. Alina forced a small smile. "Yeah, just tired." Lily wasn't convinced. "You've been different since that detective came in. You sure everything's okay?" Alina hesitated. She didn't want to drag Lily into this. If something dangerous was coming, she didn't want anyone else getting hurt. "I'll be fine," she finally said. But the truth was, she wasn't sure. A message from the past. The unease only grew when she received an envelope with no return address in her locker at the restaurant. Inside was a single photograph. It was an image from years ago, a photo of her and her old unit. They were standing in front of a military vehicle, dressed in full gear, dust from the desert swirling behind them. But what sent a chill through Alina's spine was the red X drawn over her face. Her hands clenched the photo. Someone knew who she was, someone from her past, and they wanted her to know they were watching. Her mind raced. Who had sent this? Could it be someone from her old squad? A mission that had gone sideways. A mistake that came back to haunt her. One thing was certain. This wasn't over. And if someone was trying to scare her off, they had picked the wrong person. An unexpected visitor. That night, she sat alone in her apartment, staring at the photo. The shadows outside her window seemed darker than usual. She kept her sidearm within reach, an old habit from the military. At exactly 2:37 a.m., there was a knock at her door. She didn't move immediately. Few people had reason to visit her this late, and no one ever knocked. Her heart pounded, but her training kicked in. Quietly, she grabbed her gun, keeping it low and out of sight. She approached the door without making the sound. Another knock, more forceful this time. "Alina Carter." The voice was deep, rough. "I know you're in there. We need to talk." She hesitated. Something about the voice felt familiar. Slowly, she cracked the door open, just enough to see who it was. Standing in the dim hallway was a man she hadn't seen in years. Nathan Briggs. A ghost from her past. A warning too late. Nathan had been a fellow Marine, someone she had fought alongside. But the last time she had seen him, he had walked away from everything. And now he was standing in her doorway, looking worn, tense, and most of all, afraid. "You need to leave town," he said without preamble. Alina's grip on the door tightened. Not a chance. Nathan cursed under his breath. "Damn it, Carter, this isn't a game. You have no idea what's coming." "Then tell me." He exhaled sharply. "It's about Operation Blackthorn." Alina's blood ran cold. That was a name she hadn't heard in years. A classified mission, one that had ended in secrecy, buried beneath layers of military red tape. "Someone's cleaning up loose ends," Nathan continued, his voice low. "2 of our old squad members are already dead. Their deaths were ruled as accidents. But I know better. And now, they're looking for you." Alina's mind raced. Could this be connected to the robbery? "You need to disappear," Nathan insisted. "Lay low. They'll come for you next." Alina stared at him, her pulse steady despite the storm inside her. "No," she said firmly. "If they're coming, then I'm staying right here." Nathan looked frustrated. "Damn it, Carter, you're not invincible. These people don't leave trails. You won't see them coming until it's too late." She smirked. "Then I'll make sure they see me coming first." Nathan ran a hand through his hair. "I should have known you wouldn't listen." He sighed. "Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you." He reached into his pocket and handed her a slip of paper. "Find me if things go south," he said, "and trust no one." With that, he turned and disappeared into the night. Alina closed the door, staring at the address on the paper. The shadows were closing in, and she was ready. The hunter becomes the hunted. Alina spent the next day preparing. If someone was coming for her, she wouldn't wait to be a victim. She scanned the restaurant for vulnerabilities, blind spots, exit routes, places where an ambush could occur. She checked her firearm, making sure it was loaded and within reach at all times. She started watching the people around her, looking for any sign that someone new was watching her. Then, at exactly 8:15 p.m., she noticed something. A man sitting at the bar. He had been there for 3 hours, nursing a drink he barely touched. His posture was too rigid, his eyes too calculating. He wasn't a customer. He was watching her. Alina's jaw tightened. Whoever he wasn't just some random guy. He was waiting for something. Her hands curled into fists. If they wanted to play this game, she was ready. She had spent her life being the hunter. She refused to be the prey. The first move. Instead of avoiding him, Alina did the unexpected. She walked straight up to him. "Enjoying the drink?" she asked casually. The man didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled. "Just admiring the view," he replied smoothly. Alina held his gaze, unmoving. A test of will. And that's when she saw it. A glint of recognition in his eyes. He knew exactly who she was, and she knew exactly what that meant. The game had begun. The trap is set. A dangerous game begins. Alina Carter had been a soldier long enough to recognize a predator when she saw one. And the man at the bar, with his easy smile and deliberate movements, was exactly that. He wasn't just watching her. He was waiting for something. Most people, when faced with danger, would flee. Alina. She walked straight into it. Her instincts were razor sharp as she slid into the bar stool across from him, her expression unreadable. The dim lighting of the golden lantern cast shadows over his face, but she could still see the slight smirk playing at the corner of his lips. He knew she had figured him out. The question was, who was he working for? A calculated move. "I don't believe we've met," Alina said coolly, tilting her head slightly. The man chuckled, lifting his glass of whiskey as if making a silent toast. "Oh, but I've heard all about you, Miss Carter." Alina didn't react. She had learned long ago that the best way to throw someone off was to give them nothing. "Is that so?" she mused, taking the slow sip of water. "And what exactly have you heard?" He swirled his drink, watching the amber liquid move in his glass. "That you're a former Marine. That you stopped a robbery like it was a training exercise. That you've got a temper, but you hide it well." He met her gaze, his smile unwavering. and that you're not very good at backing down. Alina's heart remained steady, but her mind was racing. This wasn't small talk. He was testing her. She leaned forward slightly. "And what about you? Should I know your name?" The man smiled wider. "Call me Vincent." A fake name. She knew it instantly. But that meant something important. He wasn't afraid, but he also wasn't careless. That made him dangerous. Alina exhaled softly and sat back. She had two choices. She could keep playing along, pretending not to know that he was following her, or she could go on the offensive, force him to show his hand. And Alina Carter had never been the kind to wait. The first strike. She tapped her fingers against the bar, pretending to consider his words. "It's funny, Vincent." He raised an eyebrow. "What is?" "That a man like you would sit here for hours, barely touching your drink, waiting for me to walk over." His smirk didn't waver, but she saw the flicker of something in his eyes. Recognition that she had called him out. "Maybe I just enjoy the atmosphere," he said smoothly. Alina chuckled, shaking her head. "See, I don't buy that. You're not here for the food. You're not here for the drinks. You're here for me." She met his gaze dead on. "So let's skip the bullshit. Who sent you?" For the first time, Vincent's smirk faltered. And in that split second, Alina knew she had him. A battle of wits. Vincent set his glass down. "You're a bold woman, Carter. I like that. But you're not answering my question." He exhaled, then glanced around the restaurant. "How about we take this conversation outside? Fewer ears." Alina smiled. "You think I'm dumb enough to follow you into an alley?" Vincent chuckled. "No, but I figured I'd try." She folded her arms, studying him. "You didn't come here to kill me. If you had, you wouldn't be sitting across from me. Maybe I just enjoy the game." Alina nodded. "Maybe, but you're not the one holding the winning cards." Vincent sighed dramatically. "Fine, I'll give you something." He leaned forward, his voice lower. "Your little incident at the restaurant. That wasn't supposed to happen, but it made you visible. And the people looking for you, they don't like that." Alina's stomach tightened, but she didn't let it show. "And who exactly are they?" Vincent smirked. "Now, that would ruin the fun." Alina's patience snapped. In a swift motion, she grabbed his wrist under the table and twisted it sharply. His smirk disappeared as he hissed in pain, but he didn't fight back. Instead, he laughed. "Damn, you really are as dangerous as they say." Alina tightened her grip. "Next time you come looking for me, bring answers, or don't come at all." Vincent sighed and pulled back, rubbing his wrist. "Noted." Then he stood. "Enjoy the rest of your night, Carter. But a word of advice. Watch your back." And just like that, he walked out. The truth in the silence. Alina sat there for a long moment, her thoughts churning. Vincent hadn't given her a name. But he had given her something far more valuable: confirmation. There were people looking for her, and they had been watching her this entire time. She glanced at the bartender. "Did you see that guy?" The bartender nodded. "Yeah. Never seen him before, but he tipped big." Alina's jaw tightened. Of course he did. He wanted people to remember him. But why? She pulled out her phone and dialed Detective Adrian Cole. "We need to talk," she said the moment he picked up. Cole didn't hesitate. "Did something happen?" "Yes," she said, standing up. "And I think the robbery was just the beginning. The unraveling mystery." When Alina met Detective Cole the next morning, he was already waiting with a file in hand. "I did some digging," he said as they sat across from each other in a small cafe. "Remember how I told you the robbery might not have been random?" Alina nodded. Cole slid the file toward her. "Turns out, one of the gunmen had a sealed criminal record. The kind that doesn't just disappear unless someone powerful makes it happen." Alina frowned. "Meaning?" Cole exhaled. "Meaning he wasn't just some low-level thug. Someone cleaned his past. someone important. And that same someone might have sent him after you. Alina felt a slow burn of anger. And you still don't know who? Cole shook his head. Not yet. But I do know this. Whatever's happening, it goes deep. And if you're mixed up in it, his eyes darkened. They won't stop coming. Alina leaned back, gripping the edge of the table. She had spent years surviving wars. She had fought battles in the dead of night. And now, the real war was just beginning. The trap springs shut. A city that never sleeps. A predator that never rests. The city at night was a different world. The Golden Lantern was nestled in an area where wealth shined like gold-plated illusions. But just a few streets away, the shadows grew darker, deeper, the kind of places where deals were made with whispered threats and debts were paid in blood. Alina Carter knew that world all too well. She had spent the last few days watching, waiting, setting her own trap. The moment Vincent had walked away from that bar, she had known he'd be back. But this time, she would be ready. The watchers in the dark. It started with small things. A car parked too long outside her apartment. A man pretending to check his phone, but staring just a second too long. Footsteps echoing behind her in an empty alley, disappearing when she turned around. She wasn't just being watched. She was being hunted. Alina wasn't afraid. She was furious. And she was done playing defense. Laying the bait. She knew one thing about men like Vincent. They thrived on control. They didn't like being exposed, didn't like being seen before they were ready. So she forced his hand. Alina didn't change her routine. She went to work. She took the late shifts. She walked home alone. She left herself open, a tempting target. And then on the third night, he came back. She saw him from the corner of her eye as she left the restaurant, leaning casually against a street lamp, hands in his pockets. But she also saw the black SUV parked down the street, the tinted windows, the engine idling. Back up. Alina's heartbeat remained steady as she kept walking. She didn't react, didn't break her pace. She needed them to think she was unaware. She turned down a side street, an alley she had chosen specifically, a perfect place for an ambush. But they weren't the only ones hunting tonight. A trap within a trap. The moment she stepped into the alley, she heard it, the quiet crunch of footsteps behind her. She kept walking, letting them think she was still oblivious. 5 steps. 4. 3. Then, she moved. A flash of motion. She spun on her heel, grabbing Vincent's wrist before he could even reach for a weapon. His smirk vanished as she twisted his arm and slammed him against the brick wall. "Didn't expect that, did you?" she murmured. Before he could reply, the van door swung open. 2 men stepped out, armed. Vincent chuckled, despite the pain. Now, Carter. Did you really think we'd let you walk away?" Alina's grip tightened. "Funny. I was about to ask you the same thing." She whistled, and the moment she did, all hell broke loose. The hunters become the hunted. From the rooftops above, a red laser dot appeared on one of the men's foreheads. A split second later, a gunshot rang out. The man crumpled to the ground. The second one turned, raising his weapon. But before he could fire, a second shot. Alina used the distraction. She grabbed Vincent, twisting him into a chokehold, pressing her knee into his spine. "You should have done your homework," she whispered against his ear. "I don't walk alone." From the rooftop, a figure rappelled down in seconds. Nathan Briggs. The ex-Marine had been waiting for this moment. He landed lightly, weapon drawn, his eyes locked on the remaining threats. "Vincent," he greeted coldly. "Didn't expect to see you so soon." Vincent struggled, but Alina didn't loosen her hold. This isn't over," he gritted out. Alina smiled. "Oh, I know." Then, with a swift motion, she slammed him into the ground, knocking him unconscious. The alley fell into silence. Nathan nudged one of the fallen men with his boot. "Guess they didn't expect you to set the trap first." Alina exhaled slowly, the adrenaline still pumping through her veins. We need answers. Nathan crouched down, searching Vincent's pockets. He found what they needed: a burner phone, and a single message displayed on the screen. She's still breathing. Finish it. Alina's stomach tightened. Whoever had sent these men, they weren't done. And now, neither was she. The next move. Back at Nathan's safe house, Alina studied the burner phone. The message had been sent just an hour ago, from an unknown number. We need to trace it, she said. Nathan sighed. Whoever they are, they'll be careful. Alina's eyes hardened. Then we'll be smarter. Nathan nodded. You really want to go after them, don't you? Alina met his gaze. They came after me first. Nathan smirked. Then let's make sure they regret it. Alina clenched her fists. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was war. The final showdown. Warriors don't run. They hunt. Alina Carter had spent her life fighting battles. Some were on foreign soil, where the lines between friend and enemy were clear. Others were quieter wars, personal ones, fought in the shadows of society, where survival wasn't about firepower, but about resilience. But this war, this one was personal. For weeks, she had been hunted. The robbery at the Golden Lantern had been the first strike, but it wasn't just about money. It had been a warning, a message that someone from her past had come back for her. And tonight, she was ending it. The call that changed everything. Nathan paced the small, dimly lit room of his safe house, arms crossed over his chest as he watched Alina work. The burner phone they had taken from Vincent had led them nowhere at first. Blocked traces, dead-end numbers, unregistered accounts. But Alina knew there was always a weakness. Someone always left a crack open. And she had found it. The last outgoing call that pinged off a private cell tower, one linked to an address outside the city. A warehouse. Nathan leaned against the table, watching her with narrowed eyes. This could be a trap. Alina didn't look up. It is a trap. He raised an eyebrow. And you're still walking into it. She finally met his gaze. I don't walk into traps, Nathan. I spring them. A slow smirk played on his lips. Dan Carter. I really missed working with you. She checked her weapon, tucking an extra magazine into her waistband. Then let's go remind them who they're dealing with. The warehouse of secrets. The location was perfect, isolated, quiet, forgotten. A place where things could happen that no one would ever hear about. Nathan killed the headlights as they approached, stopping the car a block away. The warehouse loomed in the darkness, its metal exterior rusted and worn. Alina stepped out, her instincts flaring to life. No guards outside. Too quiet. Nathan crouched behind a pile of crates, scanning the area through binoculars. I count at least 5 heat signatures inside. Maybe more. Alina exhaled slowly. This was it. She secured her earpiece. We go in silent. We don't fire unless we have to. Nathan smirked. And if they fire first? Alina chambered around. Then we burn it all down. Ghosts from the past. They moved like shadows, slipping through the cracks of the old warehouse's defenses. The first guard barely had time to react before Alina took him down with a silent strike to the throat. Nathan grabbed another, wrapping an arm around his neck and squeezing until his body went limp. They dragged the bodies into the shadows. Inside, voices murmured. Footsteps echoed on concrete. Then, a voice Alina hadn't heard in years. I told you she wouldn't run. She froze. Nathan's gaze snapped to her. Who is that? Alina's jaw clenched. Lieutenant Mark Vance, her old commanding officer, and the man she had once trusted with her life.